Welcome to the Good News Mama podcast, a place to get in touch with other mamas, share the load, and know the Lord. Here we aim to lift each other up in the good news of Jesus and the laughter that comes with motherhood. We are a community of mamas just trying to keep the main thing the main thing. I'm your host, Lynn Carter, and each time you tune in, I pray you are encouraged and that you leave challenged and breathe a sigh of relief that you are understood. We were not meant to do life alone, Mama. Thanks for joining in. Let's do this and let's share the good news. Hey, what's up, Mama? I'm so happy you're here because I have an awesome guest today. Her name is Wendy Snyder. She is a parenting expert. She focuses on positive parenting tools, and she's just such a beautiful soul. Everything we talked about today was kind of like a Cliff Notes version of anything you could possibly use as a parent for positive parenting, connecting with your child, just basically outside the box thinking instead of reacting, responding. And I just can't wait for you to dive in. I don't want to steal her thunder because she definitely has so many awesome things to share. So without further ado, here is Wendy Snyder from Fresh Start Family Online, here today with us on the Good News Mama podcast. Welcome, Wendy, to the podcast. Thanks for being here, girl.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat, Lynn.
Oh, me too. I'm definitely stoked because I've got all the questions for you, girl. I love that we met. Yes, I love that we met through a Facebook group online, and basically I learned that you're an expert at positive parenting, and that's what you do. I'd love for you to share more about that in a minute, but I'm so jealous. I wanted to say that you live in California, and it's been raining on the East Coast for like ever. So the fact that I see you on Instagram, the beautiful sunshine, I'm like, oh, Wendy, I'm so jealous.
I know. Well, I know that East Coast life. I grew up on the East Coast for 18 years, so I did my time there. And yes, you're right. It is beautiful here.
Yes. Awesome. Well, why don't you start by sharing with mamas who you are, what's your passion, what's your purpose, and then we'll jump into some of the extra stuff.
Yes. So my name is Wendy Snyder. I am a positive parenting educator and family life coach. I founded my company. It's called Fresh Start Family about 3.5 years ago. And it's an online learning platform to help busy, stressed mamas and parents from all over the world who want to expand their parenting toolkit so they can truly be at choice with how they raise their littles, so they can create family legacies and memories that they are proud of. And we have a few online courses and a membership program now with families from all over the world, represented in over 10 countries now. And just a really active community. And I'm so passionate about teaching this work. My story is that, I wasn't always so positive in my parenting journey. When my daughter, her first few years of life, things got pretty rocky. It got pretty dark, and I just did not like her. I did not like parenting. She is a very strong-willed, beautiful soul. And I didn't know what to do with that at first. And so thank God positive parenting came into my world. Thank God God brought positive parenting into my world, and everything changed. The light really started to return to my days. I was able to see her in a whole new way. I started to work with her in a whole new way. And ever since then, I knew I wanted to teach, and now just have the honor of supporting these beautiful families every day, many of them who are breaking painful generational cycles. And it's just awesome. So love it. This work is my jam.
I love that story. I feel like so many of us can relate as mamas, because it's like they hand you the baby and you're allowed to take it home and you're like, wait, I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm doing. So we spend like all this time trying to figure out how to be a mom and what our kids need, and wondering like, are we doing it right? Are we messing them up? All those like backward thoughts that go through our mind. But I love how I've seen in your lives how you describe some of those strong-willed kids as cactus kids. And I thought, do you mind explaining that a little bit, just so a mama could have an aha moment about maybe they have one of these kids and they're not bad, they're actually beautiful and a blessing to raise? But go into that for us a little bit.
Absolutely. So I like to call them cactus kids because I once had a wise mentor remind me that not everybody can be a little daisy or like an orchid. Our world needs cacti. We need those out of the box thinkers who are courageous and brave and are so concerned about justice and are not afraid to be outspoken or different than others or really stand tall for what they believe in. And that I really think is a lot of what our strong-willed kids are. Many of our strong-willed kids are our future leaders. They have a really strong desire to feel powerful. It's one of the basic human needs. It's part of the psychology that I teach here within my work. All misbehavior, all behavior is based upon our needs and how met our needs are or not met our needs are. But when it comes to strong-willed kids, I know, because I've been blessed with one and over the last decade learned how to work with her, that it can be really challenging, right? Like if you aren't prepared, if you're not given the tools to correctly care for a cactus, there's a good chance that you're going to end up miserable because you're like always bummed this cactus is making you bleed and it's incredibly hard to move because you don't know how to pick it up. And, it starts to wilt every time you water it because you never realized you shouldn't be watering it because it doesn't desire water, right? Like cacti are beautiful. And again, our world needs them and they require a certain type of care that you need to get educated around or need to fill up your toolkit so you're at choice with how you work with them. So cactus kids can be sharp. They can be hard to handle. And they often are our biggest catalyst for change because many times they mirror us. So strong-willed kids, cactus kids, power kids, all synonyms for one another, right? Yeah. But most of us who have a strong-willed kid, I joke the apple doesn't fall far. And I remember hearing that when my daughter was 3 years old. She had just had a meltdown in the middle of the street. And it was 2 days later. And my neighbor, who's a preschool teacher, still is. So that was 10 years ago. She still is a preschool teacher. But she was telling me about a conference she had with one of her more difficult little kids. And she said, yeah, the parents, they just don't get it. She's like, because the apple doesn't fall far. And I remember looking at her and being like, ew, what are you talking about? Because at the time I had this very wild, the words I used to describe her were out of control, sassy, disobedient, difficult, super sensitive, just a pain in the butt, except for I labeled it PIA. I had its own little acronym, she's being a PIA. And so I looked at her and I was like, I didn't say it, but in my mind I was like, that's such BS. That child does not represent me. Right. I'm not like that. Right. And as I, thank God, was humbled and opened my heart, I realized, oh my gosh, yeah, she's strong-willed just like me. She has a strong justice button. She is brave and courageous. She is persistent as heck. She is perseverant. She goes for what she wants. She has strong opinions. She has a loud voice. And,
which is funny because those are the things we want in our kids, right? We want them to be leaders. We want them to be, but not against us. Don't defy us. Don't push back on us. And sometimes we don't know how to handle that as parents. And just like you said, which I've got 3 boys and I think my third one is a cactus kid. And I say that because he has a mind of his own and he just knows what he wants when he wants it. He's not trying to be rude, but he is so he just comes off really brash, really sharp, like a cactus. And if you're not careful, you take things personally as if a 2-year-old is intending to attack you, or be condescending. I mean, they're 2, they're not trying to, they're communicating. And so I did stumble across positive parenting, probably a year or so, maybe 2 years ago when my first child was just getting out of the toddler phase. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. And so there was a lot of mindset shifts that changed once I learned about positive parenting. Can you touch on just maybe a couple of mindset shifts or a couple of 2 or 3 things you wish you had known earlier on that would have helped, or that maybe mama's listening now or oh my gosh, that is life-changing, just that tip alone? Can you think of
that? So, the first one is definitely that it sure seems like our kids are out to get us sometimes. The phrase that we'll use in common culture is they know exactly what they're doing. My 13-year-old right now, she'll say to her little brother who's 10, you know. I'm always cracking up. I'm like, It's so funny. But as parents will say, like, you know exactly what you're doing. You like, he knows how to push my buttons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a toxic scarcity mindset that will take you down as a parent and rob your joy. So our kids are not out to get us. They're just trying to figure out how to do this thing we call life. And they're always trying to communicate. Misbehavior equals communication. That's all it is. And when our kids are misbehaving, when we stand from an empowered standpoint as a parent, when we have a full toolkit, when we feel like our backs aren't up against the wall with only 4 options, bribery, threats, fear, force, bribery, and threats. Those are kind of the classic 4 that I say we all just hand me down. Like we just get it from our parents, right? Like they did that, what they could at the time with the toolkit that they had, but you don't have to learn how to do those things. Like you just get them, right? But as you're raising children, that can sure feel crappy because you're like, that's the only choice I have. Well, it's actually not true. When you learn and expand your heart, learn your tools, and strengthen your family with positive parenting, you end up having hundreds of tools to choose from. And you get to be really at choice. And you realize that, when a child is communicating, you have the power to assist them, redirect their misbehavior, help them get their need met in an appropriate way, and teach them the life skill that they're lacking. And it's just so much more fun and so much more effective to do parenting that way.
Gosh.
So that's one of my favorites. And then, of course, I have to put in there that every day is a fresh start. Like it is, if what you're doing right now, or the way you're disciplining, or, the way you're reacting to your child, especially when they misbehave a lot, does not feel good when you go to bed at night and you lay your head on your pillow, just remember that tomorrow is a fresh start. Like if you decide you want to invest in education and learning a different way, you are completely capable and empowered to do that. You just have to step into learning. And I'm just all about fresh starts because even this afternoon can be a fresh start. But you have to have the mindset to be able to receive it and ask God for that reset, and then step into learning, because things will not change if you never really step into learning.
I love that. I do. I think that just giving yourself the grace to know, yes, you made a mistake, or yes, you could have handled something differently, but then realizing it's not the end. Like this is just the beginning. Yeah. I'm learning. I've heard it said before that like when you have a kid, if it's your first kid, like you're a 1-month-old parent when your kid turns 1 month old. When your kid turns 2, you're a 2-year-old parent. So give yourself a little grace, because you really haven't had that much time to learn and know and do. And you're just expected to be the perfect parent, or so we think we are. And sometimes we embody that and we start taking on an identity that wasn't ours to begin with, instead of just focusing on connecting with our children, which is another thing that I love about positive parenting. It made me think when you're talking about screaming and that sort of thing. It happened just last week. I had 2 of 3 kids literally screaming in our house because the ceiling is high in one of our rooms. It echoes so loud, and I was losing my ever-loving mind. And I'm like, okay, everybody that's screaming. And I was going to say, go to your room. But instead I said, I just realized that I was on the wrong track when I was doing that. Nice. And I was just like basically lashing out at them. I said, come here and give me a hug right now. And like everybody just came to me and hugged me. And it was like the best victory moment, because I realized like as many times as I've gotten it wrong, that time I got it right. And it was just enough to like turn the tears off. Like it is amazing what happens when you choose to connect with your children instead of, like you said, the fear, the force, the tools we think we have to use. And so when that happened, and I was literally like public service announcement, if you are screaming, like I'm trying to help this kid and all these are screaming, I was going to be like, God, just get away, and instead I said, just come here right now and give me a hug. And that is one of the biggest things from positive parenting that I've learned is like, try not to react, try to respond. The problem with that is you have to turn your brain on. And as a parent, when you have all these feelings going in your body and your mind and you're like losing it, thinking is the last thing you want to do. You want to stop whatever the problem is. But then when you realize your kid is experiencing that as a 4-year-old, 2-year-old, whatever, then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the adult. I should have the regulation, that sort of thing. So, Go
That's
ahead.
what's so cool about the kids, especially the difficult ones, is oftentimes as they are developing what we call neuro pathways of like the self-control, the self-regulation. How do you process anger without freaking out? How do you, how do you react to like scary situations without flipping your lid? Like they're developing that, let's say between the ages of 2 to 6, often at the same time we are, because we didn't grow up in an era where this stuff was taught, right? Like when you didn't have self-control, self-regulation, or you made a mistake, like that's it. Like
Right.
that, you just stop it is all you knew. That's bad. Shame. Like you're
Right.
going to get hurt. There's going to be pain for most of us. Right. And
Right.
normally there wasn't like a, here's how you self-regulate. Let me show you, let me teach you, let me model it for you.
Yeah.
And so it's so cool to think like that, that in that moment you were like, oh my gosh, we are all trying to self-regulate here. And you used connection and it was powerful,
Right.
right? Like that's the cool thing about positive parenting is the strategies and the tools. They're not weak. They're not
Yes.
permissive. A lot of people get confused about that. They are strong. Like they are strong and
Yes.
powerful when it comes to influencing other people. And quick story, Lynn,
Yeah.
about that whole, like, you've been a parent for this long. My daughter actually had said that to me. She was 7 years old. So she's 13 now. And there was a moment when her and her brother, like one of my Achilles heels things has always been the kids bickering. So, because they're both very strong-willed and they're just like, they have a strong voice. So they bicker quite a lot, quite a bit. They've gotten a lot better, but they had been bickering and like probably got into a fight or something. And maybe someone like, smacked another one or something. And I was like, that's it. I freaked out. I was like, you're going to bed. And this was like a few years into teaching, or at least getting to know positive parenting. And she's in tears. I'm like fuming, fires coming out of my head. I'm just so tired from the day, like we get. And I was just like, I'm done. I'm done with you guys. And Stella comes up to me with tears. She's always been this like very wise soul, which I think so many of the power kids are. She holds my hand and she looks me in the eyes, tears streaming down her face. She goes, Mom, please don't do this. She goes, we are learning as kids. She goes, we're going to make different decisions tomorrow about the fighting. We've learned our lesson. We understand that was not okay what we did. And she goes, we've only been kids. I've only been a kid for 7 years, Mom. You've only been a mom for 7 years. We're figuring out how to do this together. And like still to this day, that story
Oh
brings me
my
so much
gosh.
emotion because it was
Yes.
such a radical moment where she walked me off the ledge. Like
Yes.
that's how you break painful generational cycles
I have
where
chills.
freaking out and
Yeah.
shaming people and controlling and
Gosh.
overpowering, like they start to fade away when you
Yeah.
accept that your child is often a gift from God to teach you. Like, yes, we
Yes.
teach our kids a lot, but when you have
Yes.
your eyes and your heart open, it's like, holy smokes. And she now is like, she really is one of the best people that can walk me off the ledge because I'm still like a sassy, I'm just a strong personality. So
Hey, Mama, isn't Wendy great? Maybe you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, that's nice, Wendy, but I'm not a strong personality. I don't need talking off the ledge. In fact, I don't even have a ledge. But how in the world do I ask for help? How do I reach out when I am overwhelmed and I don't know what to do? Well, go ahead and grab my free resource at my bit.ly link, which is bit.ly/goodnewsmama, ask for help. You'll get the free resource. I'd love to see you use that and tell me what you think. But basically, we're just trying to demystify this thing about being vulnerable, letting our guard down, and asking for help in a real way that leads to peace in our lives and actually builds community with others around us. I love you guys, and I want you to thrive in your motherhood. So go grab that resource, bit.ly/goodnewsmama, ask for help.
sometimes if I get into like a little, she
Yeah.
often will say some things that I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. I need
That
to go
is,
chill.
but she didn't just come up with that language as a 7-year-old, Wendy. Like you
Right.
gave her that. Like, and that's the thing is like when they show you yourself back, you're like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh. And I've said that about my faith too, that like as a mother, I've had less time in God's word than I had like in my 20s when I, was a part of groups and Bible studies and all the
Yeah.
things that required so much time. But the face of my children and the experiences I have with them on a daily basis, I feel like God is going, uh-huh. get it? Like, do you understand? This is how I feel about you. Like, I'll love you no matter what, even though you make bad choices, things like that.
Yep.
You kind of mentioned like some of the language, that how you looked at your daughter in the beginning versus after positive parenting. And I think that's crucial. I think that's amazing that you shared that, because that's a mindset shift that like you're empowering your kids when you do that. And you talked about empowering, and you talked about how your journey was a little tortured in the beginning toward positive parenting. What about the mama that's listening right now? She's loving what you're saying. She wants that for her and her children and their relationship, but she doesn't know how hubby is going to do with that, like spouse wise. What advice could you give? You tell me, and then I'll tell you how my husband responded the first time I shared with him some of these tips.
Yeah. Well, I always tell the mamas who are really either scared or just certain that their husband is not going to be on board. And, with over 230 members from all over the world now, we support families quite a bit with this. And it's been just, like I said, an honor to do so. And those families have experienced radical growth through this journey. But I always tell mamas that, it's okay to always invest in education. Like, no one can ever knock you, and your spouse is not always going to understand until you are brave and courageous enough to step out first, often, and do the work and start applying it in your home. But it really does take that. Like, as full-blown adult women, like, I really just encourage us to stand strong in the way that God is calling our heart to step into, not necessarily to wait for somebody to be on the same page as us for us to do it together. Now, doing it together is always the best way, right? Like, I got really lucky with a husband and a mother-in-law who were like so on board from day one, right? It made it so much easier, for sure. And like I said, I work with so many families every single day who have the husbands who are super not on board. They were raised very autocratically, lots of fear and force. So to get out of that habit or to break that generational cycle is definitely such a journey that, again, I find such an honor to support them with. But you really do have to step in and have courage and bravery first. And you have to remember that that is going to take you feeling scared first. So you're going to feel scared that your husband's going to judge you. You're going to feel scared that it's not going to work. You're going to feel scared that you're going to try to be gentle with your kids when you're used to spanking or forcing timeouts. And it's, your kid's going to instead grow up to be an entitled maniac. Like, all of those are feelings of feeling scared. And when you choose to courageously listen to your heart, or that small, still voice of God who is saying to you, I think you want to go that direction. Like, there's something over there I want you to learn. Invest in that book, invest in that program, start attending those live, feeds that woman host, or that ministry host, or whatever it is. And you do it, then it's very inspirational to your spouse, and then they will follow suit. And again, I've seen this over and over again. Sometimes it's months, sometimes it's years. Like, I have Bonfire members who we are like really big about sharing success stories, and they will come in and say, holy smokes, it's been a year and 3 days since I joined the foundations course and the Bonfire membership program. And just last night, my husband said to me, he is ready to start watching the foundations course lessons with me. Wow. And we all celebrate with them, because we're like, heck yeah, you did that, mama. Like, like, there are so many opportunities for us as wives to lovingly and courageously guide our husbands in a direction that will provide healing and just joy and connection for our home. And they've got their own list of things they're trying to do. They're not necessarily always going to see it like we do. And so, be brave, be courageous. And like I said, I have up-teen stories of the dads who do come on board. We have so many resources too for the dads who aren't on board yet within our membership program. So, if they're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this compassionate discipline thing, we have a video for that, like to just encourage them, like, hey, I know where you're at. I get it. No wonder you're feeling like this,
Right. Definitely. And I've tried in the beginning, I tried explaining it to my husband. Well, first off, what we're doing now isn't working. So we've tried that, right? We've tried the timeouts. We've tried the spanking. We've tried taking away things, all this stuff. Like, let's just try this empathy thing, which the first time I heard it, It was a really old book I checked out from the library, which actually paralleled positive parenting a lot, but it was basically like empathize with your child when like during meltdowns when something goes wrong. And so that was the problem, is that you couldn't pull them back. Once they were in this meltdown, they were stuck. You had to ride it out, whatever. But when you empathize with them, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, are you okay? Like, you actually treat them how you want to be treated when you're having a mental adult meltdown.
Yeah.
It immediately changes things. Their attitude, their demeanor changes. They're like, thinking that we care, which we do. It sounds weird because their problem doesn't seem that big to us, but to them, it's their world. So that was one thing that really, I think my husband saw by my example, was the empathy part. And he's like, I can't say that I'm sorry for something if I'm not. And I'm like, you don't have to use those words. Just be there with them. Just put your hand on their leg. Just let them know that like you're in their space with them and it's okay. And it was more about like body language, physical connection with them to like help them switch from like upstairs, downstairs brain type thing, like versus the reactive versus the responsive type thing. And it made such a big difference. It was amazing. Just what you're saying.
That's
so
awesome.
If you're a mama listening to this and you're scared about what your husband thinks, just start, just try, just like Wendy says, catch a few lives, see what's going on with it, implement a few things. If you feel comfortable going the next step and investing, that's great. But it is, oh my gosh, it's so much worth a try. So
yes, absolutely. Oh, I love all that.
And I was thinking, a lot of times on the podcast, I can obviously relate to 6 and under because that's my age of motherhood. When parents have tweens and teens, how does this look for them? What's the difference there? Because they seem to me stereotypically more distant, more withdrawn, and we feel like we might be infringing on their space and things that are going on. So how do you deal with your tween and teen?
Well, it is true, right? Once kids become teens, they are basically young adults, right? Like back in the day, they were like released out into the world.
That's crazy.
So crazy to look at my 13-year-old and think like back in the day, she might have been having babies by now. She'd probably be married. Like it's crazy, right? So yes, they are young adults. And at that time, you really are like your main job. I like to encourage parents, think of it as not like you need to parent these kids. It's like you are now in full mentorship mode and it's never too late. Don't get what I'm going to say. Mistake it for like, no, it's too late if you have a teen and you're just starting. But what I will say that is if you practice this work and you prioritize connection over correction and you have relationship-based gentle, firm, and kind parenting in your home, your relationship becomes rock strong, like rock solid with your kids. And once they become teens, that relationship is what influences them to behave well, because no amount of fear or force, like or bribery of rewards, it can influence them at that point. Now, yes, some of them will still be influenced by like, I'm going to take your car away. I'm going to take your keys away.
Right.
But all the, the classic threats that you do, you're going to be grounded. But a lot of them just tap out at some point and say, I do not care anymore, because they're so sick of the overpowering. And at that point, they can actually make a choice on their own. And so it just gets really muddy. And so really, again, when you invest in this style of influencing your children because they're inspired by you and because they care so deeply, you're so interconnected with your relationship through experiences, like you said, Lynn, right? Like if you go from having, let's be real for kids your age. If you have 20 situations a month where normally you used to just like yell, threaten, like timeouts, physical pain, hurt, fear, be intimidated, be scared by me. And then all of a sudden you start to shift into like now 10 times a month, because you're learning, you're growing, you're courageously trying new things. Now 10 times a month, those are connection-based experiences where you use compassionate discipline. And everybody at the end has learned a life skill. They've developed new skills of self-control and self-regulation. They've learned a lesson, but they also feel safe with you. They also feel like you truly get them. Like they're not aliens, like they belong, which by the way is one of the basic human needs, the need to belong, the need to feel powerful. When you empower them with choices and engage them in the conversation instead of just saying my way or the freaking highway, and I'll overpower you to show you how that's going to happen. Like all those experiences, they start to just mend you together. And the more you have those experiences, the more you are still connected even when they become teens. So even if they're gone at youth group lots more, and you don't see them as often, right? Like one of the biggest things of COVID, the biggest blessings of COVID is how much our teen has been around, because Terry and I feel like we got this extra year with her, because we know normally she's a drummer, she would have been a band, she would have been, sleeping over, she does beach volleyball, but we've gotten this time with her. But even if your kids get really busy as teens, even if they want that independence, which they're supposed to be developing, that's a normal, healthy human phase of life, you still have this deep connection where you are the one they come to when they have a problem, because they're not scared of you. I saw a really great meme on this that said, I want my kids to say, instead of OS, my mom's going to kill me, to say, OS, I need to call my mom.
Yeah.
Like that's what happens with this type of work. And, discipline, mentoring, setting firm limits, which is really what we help families do here a ton. It doesn't disconnect you. It actually connects you with your kids. And they look up to you with true respect. Again, not because they're scared of you, not because they're intimidated of the smackdown or what's going to get taken away. They look up to you because they're like, dang, that's a firm, kind, respectful leader that models Jesus, or that replicates the light of Jesus. And woo, that is powerful.
Yes. And as you're talking about the connection, and as you're talking about wanting your child to come to you, I think like somewhere in the back of my mind, there's always been that fear of like, I don't want my kid to look at me as just their friend. Like I want them to have that healthy respect as well. But that's not what positive parenting is doing. It's not taking away the respect and the authority. It's basically changing the behavior, in my eyes, from an extrinsic motivation to intrinsic. Now they have a relationship with you. That's driving them, not the external circumstance where they're worried they're going to get in trouble, or, they're trying to please based on, external circumstance and behavior, but they're actually thinking more. It's almost like there's this fine dance with parenting between like wanting them to do what you say and wanting to like have the authority versus like wanting them to think and react as adults, and like teach them how to think and react instead of just follow your instructions because that's what you said to do. And that's what we do as parents because I said so. Right. So,
oh my gosh. Someone needs to become a positive parenting educator because you got all the lingo down, external versus intrinsic. Yes. That's what it's all about. Wendy. Like you need to become an educator.
I appreciate that. No, thank you. But I appreciate that because my husband, he'll like jab at me sometimes and we love to joke each other anyway. But he's like, well, who are you? Some type of expert. And I'm like, no, but I read a crap ton of books. So I'm trying to learn. I don't know the answers, but I'm going to read my tail off or listen to a bunch of audiobooks until I get all these tools, like you mentioned, with the toolkit, because it's not as hard as I've made it out to be. And like me 4 years ago would have screamed and told them to go to their room instead of scream and say, come give me a hug.
and called that healthy authority, right? Like I speak on authority I have a program called Jesus Guided Parenting, and it's a 4-module online course that gives parents all the information and beautiful scriptural support to show how positive parenting is completely in line with our faith as Christians. But one of the modules, we really speak deeply to that, those hot button words, authority, submission, obedience. And, yes, you can be a beautiful authority figure in your home, a firm and kind source of authority in your home, and be deeply connected to your kids. And when you think about it, that's what we are with Jesus, right? Like he should be our best friend. When you look up the definition of friendship, I always say to parents, don't be freaked out by that word. We're not talking like, be friends like Lindsay Lohan. I don't know if you remember her mom would like throw like keg parties with her and like, and it was like completely weird and unhealthy, but a friend like is always there for you. They are someone who will hold space and listen to you. They will also hold you accountable and call you out on stuff. I spoke to a friend last night who was one of my funniest friends, like friends since college. And she just will call me out on stuff like none of my other friends. But sometimes it can feel harsh, but she is a true friend. Like she's not scared to say, that's not who you are. Like, I had this guy cut me off yesterday, really scary, almost got into a really bad accident on the road with Stella and I. And instead of taking responsibility, he blamed me. And I was so angry. And I was like, I need to like text his, because I knew the guy, like ended up, I had gone to Fiji with him. And I was like, I need to text his wife and like let her know that he's driving around like this with their son in the front seat who's 8 years old and is little and should be in a blah, blah, blah. And Nikki was like, no, that's taking it too far. Do not do that. And I was like, thank you. Like, so my point is, friends are not like, people you walk all over. Friends are not, if you have a healthy friendship with somebody, you have accountability, you have empathy, you have connection, you have all these things. And we do want that with our children. And yes, you are the one who makes the calls. You have 25, 35, 40 years of experience, right? On this beautiful earth that God created. Of course, you are the authority figure, just like our Heavenly Father, Jesus, is our authority figure. And really, I think if we're doing it right in daily relationship with him, he should be, one of our best friend also.
Yes. Is there anything that you do specifically, like incorporating your faith into your family that maybe your kids have pushed back on at first, but you just like found out a way just to keep going with it? Or, I don't know. I feel like moms sometimes, like, especially with our faith, we want to raise our children in a faith-filled home for sure. But at the same time, a lot of us that were raised in a Christian home maybe went a lot of our lives up until a certain point, hopefully, where the faith became your own, right? Versus being your family's faith. So I feel like there might be a semi-struggle with that because they want to have the impact and they want to continue living their life. But I just didn't know, especially as your kids are getting older, did you run into any hiccups with that? Or did you just basically just persevere in that and keep talking about your faith and encouraging church events and things like that?
Exactly. So that's the big thing, because we pull back so much on the force and the worry and that you have to, and, all those types of things. Like, we need to make our children end up like this. We are going to be the reasons why they become these great human beings who have deep faith. Like, it's actually God's got them there on a beautiful journey with God. We just need to support them and model, right? So the biggest deal is like the relationships, right? When if you and your spouse can like just do as much work as possible to model that healthy relationship, and then it gets modeled with your relationship in the Lord. That's like my biggest thing, is just if you can model the relationship, like every day, if your kids see you with your Bible, if they see you speaking about God out in the world, if they hear you talking to other people that are not Christians and saying God's name, right? Like, or if they see you, as Stella's old enough now, like I'm sure she sees my Instagram post every every once in a while. She sees me speaking about God to the public. Not all my community are Christians, So, and then, she's my pusher backer. So I know that I can't force her to be in youth group now in high school. And that's okay. Like, I have no doubt, like, I hold her in this very strong vision. Like, I'm very passionate about when God gives me a vision, I hold it very strong and I believe in it and I pray for it. And that's what I do. And then also there is like, once COVID's finished, like it's like, we'll go to church and you don't have to love it if you don't want to. I stopped making them go to kids classes a little bit ago. And I was okay with them coming in with us, like little things like that. Then I'm just like, whatever, as long as you're here, then I'll empower you to make some of the decisions. But everyone's different, right? I think just the consistency and letting go of the worry that you have to be the one that's going to make them be a believer. It's usually the opposite. The families who stress and obsess and try to force it, those often, unfortunately, are the ones who rebel a lot. There's a really great book called Why I Didn't Rebel. The author, I believe her name is Rachel Lindenbach. It's definitely Lindenbach, but she was a guest on our podcast, the Fresh Start Family Show, and her book is just beautiful. And she talks about growing up with a strong, family of faith, but all these reasons why, once she became a teenager and a young adult, why she didn't rebel. And so that's one of my favorite references. We have it on our shop page of the Fresh Start Family website.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I definitely need to look into that. And I feel like you nailed it on the head right there, where you're like, basically model it, live it. They're watching us anyway. Like the Bible talks about train a child in the way they should go. And when they're older, they won't depart from it. And so we feel like all the responsibility is on us. I got to train this child. I got to show this child, and really modeling and what you're doing. It's, what is that saying? Like, don't do what I say, don't do what I do what I say. Like if you're modeling it, then it's speaking so much louder anyway. And you don't have to talk to your kids like that. Like, don't do what I do.
Yes.
That was such a good
talk
reminder.
About so much of that in Jesus Got It Parenting when it comes to like discipline stuff. It's like really checking in and saying, what am I modeling here?
Yes.
So, yeah.
And it's basically like detaching yourself from the situation and having an outside view and looking in, because just like kids get wrapped up in the moment, that's what's happening with us as parents when we don't have the tools. We're getting caught up in the moment. We're not stepping back and just taking a deep breath and pausing before we respond and stuff like that. So, gosh, Wendy, this has been so great. Thank you for all these tools. Oh my goodness. I have so many more questions, but I can't believe it's been like 30, 40 minutes since we started. If you had one piece of advice to leave mamas with before we go today, what would you say?
Goodness. Just one. Oh my goodness.
I know. And we've talked about so many good things. So if you want to reemphasize one of those, that's fine too.
Okay. I'll choose my one. It's one of my favorites. So have courage and be kind. This is obviously my favorite Cinderella's quote, but I think as a parent, you have to have so much courage to step into education, courage to do things differently than your parents or your sister-in-law does or your neighbors, courage to try, out gentleness and compassion when your kid has made a really big mistake, courage to believe in your teenager, even if they keep pushing back and doing whatever. Like courage is it's one of my favorite, traits. I just love courageous human beings. And, so have courage and be kind. Your children are just trying to figure out how to do this thing called life. And, I've been counseling so many of my bonfire members lately on this idea that, where do we get the idea that in order to make our kids behave better, we must first make them feel worse? It's such a silly, odd cultural thing that has come about. And so you can do all things with kindness, right? Like the fruits of the Spirit, right? Patience, love, kindness, like, oh my gosh, gentleness, self-control, like it's a superpower. Kindness is a superpower. But when you assume the integrity in your children, when you seek to understand, when you draw close to them instead of pushing them away, like kindness is incredible. So have courage, start learning, get into a program, and be kind.
Gosh, Wendy, that is perfect advice. And what you were saying just reminded me when I've had conversations with my husband, I think exactly what you said. Like we've got this notion that if I get an emotional response from them, then I've reached them. Like if I make them upset or if I make them cry because they understand how bad they are, if they just understand how bad they've done something, which by the way, we don't say you're a bad boy. We say you made a bad choice. We kind of separate the identity from that. And that helps a lot too, at least in reminding me about my children, if not them, me, that they're not bad, that they may have made a bad choice. But just that whole warped thinking that if I get a rise out of them, like they got a rise out of me, then we're even, and they'll understand that they can't do this again. And that's not how they think. That's not how their minds work at all. Yeah. And that kindness card just trumps everything. So thank you for saying that too. We can
it's like if grace is sufficient for one, it's sufficient for all.
Yeah.
So if you would have grace on your neighbor or your sister or your husband or your pastor, please have grace on your children. It's sufficient for all.
Amen, Wendy. Oh my gosh. I know everybody wants to know where to find you. So tell us all the things about your products, your website, wherever you'd like them to go.
Yes, thank you, Lynn. Yeah. So biggest news, I think you're going to air this episode before March 23rd when I'm hosting a free 1-hour workshop online all about compassionate discipline, how you can build out a firm and kind compassionate discipline toolkit, take a break from punishment mindsets, and this will help people of all, like kids of all ages. So come join me for that. There'll be 2 times, 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Pacific. You can join that at freshstartfamilyonline.com/discipline. And then on Instagram, I'm at Fresh Start Wendy. come see me there. I'm very active on
Yes.
Instagram. And then we have a podcast, The Fresh Start Family Show. You can find us on iTunes or any of your favorite podcast platforms. And in case you're listening to this after March, I always have a freebie on the homepage of the website. So whether it's a free guide, sometimes I'll be teaching about power struggles, about responsiveness in parenting. I always have something. You can come to the website, download it, or register for a free class, and that's freshstartfamilyonline.com.
Yes, I love it. I would love to pray for you before we go, Wendy. Is there anything specific that you want prayer for?
Oh, yes, please. I'd say yes. Healing on my knees.
I saw your post. I'm so sorry. I did see that you had the MRI, meniscus, right? And a little bit of arthritis or bone
amongst just getting old. Yeah. It's like the classic getting old and being an athlete my whole life. But knees, and then peace about Facebook ads. It's like the one part of my business. And I'm like, please, can I just outsource this? And God's like, no, you need to do this right now. I'm like, okay. So it sounds silly, but
no, it doesn't.
That'd be awesome.
It sounds stressful, but yes, we'll pray about that together.
Cool.
All right. God, thank you so much for my sister. Thank you that in just a few short minutes, we can connect in such a way that is powerful and full of truth because of you and your word and because of the tools that you've given us that Wendy has shared about, that have changed her life, that has changed my life and our children's lives. God, I just thank you for the courage that she has, that not only she evokes in her own message, but that she challenges us to have. And I just pray that you would just give her the wisdom and the guidance as she courageously pursues all these venues with her business and things moving forward. God, you know the relationships that you have ordained, that you have waiting for her, the right interactions with people that will open up new venues, possible collaborations, anything, God, like that. We just pray your will be done. We pray she be open to receiving them. We just pray for that right now before we even know it. We just claim it. God, I pray for her family. I pray for her children, her husband. I thank you for the example that they are. God, I thank you for her body that is strong and healthy, but I pray for healing in her knees. God, I thank you that you've helped her embrace Pilates and swimming, and I ask that you please just bring a swift recovery there so she can return to running and surfing and doing all the things that light her up. But God, I just thank you for her genuine heart most of all, and just ask that you would bless her tremendously and help her to walk boldly in 2021, just living out her purpose for you. Just thank you, and I give you all the praise for this time until we meet again. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Good News Mama. If you did, please leave me a review on iTunes. A 5-star review is best, and hit subscribe. Share with your friends on Instagram and Facebook. Please email me at lynn@goodnewsmama.com. You know I love questions. I love feedback. I want to know what you want to know. We're going to talk about what means something to you. So let's hear it. Follow me on Instagram at Good News Mamas. That's mamas with an S. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Keep your head up, keep your heart humble, and share that good news.